Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 125 of the Gen Z podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. I always say I have a special guest because I love all my guests, but today truly is a special guest because this is my cousin that I have on, Leah Bacci. And besides being my cousin and a relative, she's also a wife, a mom, a daughter, a friend. She is a public health professional, so she's able to serve her community in so many ways. But I wanted to have Leah on because we had a conversation a couple weeks ago, just talking about how she felt truly inspired during COVID to be able to share some of her knowledge with the public. And like myself, I think we both have this calling where we want to be able to help others. And Leah started her own Instagram, Just a Girl 1978. So I want to have her on to talk about that because I feel like a lot of us can relate to kind of what she's experiencing and what she's gone through. And I think, Leah will be on probably a few times in the future. So thank you, Leah, so much for being on. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. I'm a podcast newbie. And so this is super exciting for me. Or I should say, this is my first time on a podcast. I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the past 5 years. I'm actually a podcast junkie, but in terms of on a podcast, this is my first time. So thank you, Jen. And it's great to be with you and connect with you and build our relationship in a different way. Thank you.
So excited. And I've had a lot of people on recently where it's their first time. So I feel honored to, to be that person. It's your first experience. So I hope it's a good one. But tell us, you have so many roles in your life, as many women do. But I want to talk about kind of, I want you to share a little bit of our conversation that we had. What prompted you to kind of start this Instagram account and what are you really sharing on there? But I know we talked about how COVID, I think for a lot of people was kind of, that prompt to really kind of figure out what is important in life, what your priorities are, your focuses, and kind of put us maybe on a different path. So go ahead and share with us how you were kind of feeling during that time.
Right. Thank you. So it sort of all started, COVID was such a weird time. We went from not knowing to knowing a little bit, to knowing a lot, to not knowing, to knowing a little bit, to knowing a lot. It just kept evolving. So in the beginning of COVID, it was so unsure in what we were doing and what was happening, and people were talking about it, and work was ramping up, and I didn't know if I was going to be involved. And so it was sort of just like everybody felt kind of off. And then, unfortunately, in February of 2020, my mom had a near-death stroke, massive brain bleed. And so that was in the beginning of February when life was still, quote unquote, normal. We were just talking about COVID, but life was still normal. And for anyone who knows me, my mom was an incredibly major part of my life. She helped me raise my kids. She was there daily. And so there were times in my life where I would just say, God, I'm so grateful to have my mom. I don't know what I would do without her. Well, in 10 seconds, I had to figure out what to do without her. And so that was just an incredible change that I had to adjust to. And I remember the moment where I was in the ER and I said, either I need to find the strength somewhere in my body to crawl out of this, or I am going to go down real fast. And let me just give a disclaimer. There is nothing wrong with going downhill. It happens. Some people don't have that capacity right at that moment to pull themselves up. So I'm grateful that I did. I have a lot of support. I have a wonderful spouse and family, but I made that decision. And I knew my mom would want me to make that decision. And so that was a long process of getting her healed. She's doing remarkable now, but it changed my life. And so we started where we could see her for about a month. And that's when everything went on lockdown, or we went on shutdown. And I was working probably 10 to 12-hour days, almost 7 days a week. And so in one way, it sort of helped me that I couldn't go see her in the actual room, because I honestly had no time. I would have had to really have a different role during COVID.
Mhm.
So we had to adjust and figure stuff out. And then it was COVID. So I was really deep into supporting the community. I was on our emergency operations committee. I was doing research. I was doing situational awareness once a week. We all had so many competing priorities that we had to take care of. And so you're on autopilot for a little while, and you just do what you have to do. Like if someone were to say to me, hi, I need you in this role, and you're going to start working 10 to 12-hour days, and you're going to have to take meetings on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and you're going to have to do this, I'd be like, I don't think so. That's like really not a balance.
I
But
can't do that. Yeah.
no, but that's what we did. And obviously we weren't doing anything else, so it's not like we were like going to dinner with friends or taking the kids places, or nobody was doing anything.
Yeah. That was the priority.
Yeah. And so that was just, like I said, autopilot, figuring stuff out. I learned a lot. I grew a lot in terms of my role. We were published for the program that we did, Test to Stay, to keep kids in school, so that starting the 2020-21 school year, we could try to at least do some things back in school with the students. So that was intense. I had a lot thrown at me, that I learned a lot about our county and the population of people and what's happening to individuals. I was struggling with, my mom was in full time for ICU and the hospital and rehab for about 5 months. So we didn't get to see her for 4 months. And then she was coming
That's
home.
crazy.
It was crazy. And so then she was coming home and then helping my dad make that transition, which ended up being better than we thought it was going to be. But then for those 5 months, my dad was over for dinner every day because he was alone.
Mhm.
And yes, I had family who helped too, who would invite him over or whatnot, but I was working the 10-hour days, doing whatever. My dad was coming over at night for dinner. Obviously there were times where I had to set a few boundaries and be like, Dad, I'll drop off food, but like, I have to go to bed. Like, I can't do this. I
Of
can't
course. Yeah.
entertain, right? So he was coming over. So it was the emotional side of my personal life, the emotional side of just work, and really trying to keep up stamina and like what I would do during that time. It was feeling proud for what I had accomplished so far, and then saying I did this without my mom, thinking before I could never function like that without her, and I did.
Sure.
And then it was also like just a punch in the stomach having your kids home and trying to learn and feeling so incredibly sad that their life was ruined. And I had my daughter who was when the shutdown happened, she was in her second half of junior year. My son was in his second half of 8th grade, so he didn't get to have a graduation. So many emotions. And then them, quote unquote, losing my mom, they had another person besides me to hug and bounce stuff off of and feel supported by. And it all went away. So it's just so much pressure. And like I said, for a long time, I think from, probably February of 2020 to like June of 2021, I was like on autopilot. It was just do what you can, survive. It was survival.
Yeah.
It was
For
purely
sure.
survival. Me, the kids, and obviously, like I mentioned before, my husband is incredibly supportive. And so that helped me get through emotionally. But then even just having my mom home and still dealing with work and still supporting them physically, emotionally, everything. And then it just got to the point where I could, you lose yourself because you're in survival mode. So you are, I was doing my best to exercise because that was saving my mental health.
Mhm.
Um, I had, right before my mom's stroke, I had finally like talked to someone and gone on anxiety meds, which thank God, because it helped me
Oh my gosh,
cope.
yeah.
Right, you
Timing.
still have feelings, it's not magic, but it's just like,
Absolutely.
okay, I have this overall sense that I can do it, right?
Mhm.
And then, so you're, again, just you're in survival mode, you're going, and then you start to realize all of the things that you've experienced, and you're sometimes at your lowest point. And when there is incredible stress at work and incredible stress in your home life or your personal life, something's got to give, right? So your relationship with your kids is strained because I'm pulled between work and my mom. So that's weird. My
Right.
relationship with my husband is strained for the same exact reason. But then I feel like sometimes you end up putting your spouse last because you're like, okay, well, they know I love them, so it's fine. But I need to focus first. It's, focusing on what my parents needed to be okay. Then there's what my kids need to be okay. Then there's your spouse. And that sometimes just, right, gets ignored. So not only are you dealing with the emotional side of how many things can get worse, it's more, oh my God, there's so much going on here.
There's
And
too
then,
much.
yeah. So definitely a few crazy things happened. I mean, John got my son when he was in going into track, or I'm sorry, cross country. He was doing summer running, got hit by a car. Yeah, he's okay. He was okay. He broke his tail, fractured his tailbone, but he was otherwise
I don't
okay.
even know if I realized that. Oh my
I don't think
gosh.
it wasn't really like public knowledge because it
Yeah,
was literally
sure.
like summer of 2020. So,
Right.
so he had that. Then that caused his anxiety to be so bad because then he felt bad that he couldn't finish the season. And it was just like one thing after another. And so I dove into, well, first of all, with my mom, I dove into faith big time and just started thinking about, okay, what is it that I'm looking for? What are my beliefs? How do I feel? And what is comforting to me? Listen to, and I credit my husband with this, listen to a lot of podcasts on, kind of dealing with difficult emotions, finding balance in your life. And by the way, there's no such thing as work-life balance.
I was going to say sometimes the balance is being out of balance or knowing or being okay with that you will be out of balance.
That's exactly what it is. It's accepting that you're out of balance sometimes.
Yeah. And you would write such amazing things. And, not to, I want to continue right back at this point, but, when that happened to your mom, I remember like vividly, I was in my apartment in Highwood and I had woken up. I think it was a Sunday morning
Mhm.
that because that was like the one day I didn't work. So I had slept in and my mom hadn't called me, but I got a call from Corey and she was like, told me what happened. She's like, I don't know if you heard this. And so my mom was like waiting to hear from me till I woke up. She didn't want to like leave me a text or something. And so like I was in the kitchen talking to her because she had called me a couple of times and I was like, that's weird. And I just like started crying. I was like, what? Like, what happened? And I mean, your mom was like but a huge part of your family, our family, like always there. You could always rely on her, count on her. She'd always show up for everything, be around, even just, and, to give people a little background too. Your Nana, your mom's mom, and my Nana, Mary, were sisters. So very close, very integrated. Um, but I understand how like your relationship with your mom is very similar to my relationship with my mom. And that concept of something happening, where like they're the rock of the family, how, it's I can't imagine. And I know you were posting through that time too so much. As you said, you were finding your faith and things like that. You always post updates on the Caring Bridge and just sharing your thoughts and emotions. And it was like all the time, and that takes a lot of energy, to do that. But of course, everyone appreciating those updates. But, I would just read those every day and I, I just felt so bad for everything you guys were going through and enduring, and just hearing you talk about this too, just the extreme of what it is. I can't imagine. So, fine, but you find that strength, right?
You do. And thank you for bringing up the Caring Bridge. I think that's what was the spark to kind of tie this into me starting to post. We have such a large network of people, it's like we have our small town Highwood, but it's not, it's small, but it's huge because we know
Totally.
so many people and are so connected. And my mom was so connected, and so was my dad, that I was like, how could I possibly keep up with people knowing how she's doing, but not having to call someone every single day? Because you're exhausted. I mean, you're emotionally
Yeah,
exhausted. And
no
then
way.
thank God with COVID, like I could have never done it. So I started the Caring Bridge, which, anyone listening to this, if you ever have a situation where you need to update a lot of people, just start one. It worked out to be the greatest thing ever. Everybody felt like, oh, good, I get it firsthand, because everybody wants that firsthand feedback, right? And so, I started posting, and it was kind of like, okay, I feel like this is a really good way to get out the information, but then also give people a little bit of perspective, and like keeping the faith in what I've learned and prayers I've learned, and asking people to do that. I personally think it saved her, knowing how many
Yeah.
people we had listening and attentive and praying. And so because I did the Caring Bridge, after my mom came home, I kept it up for a little while, and then I eventually stopped. But I felt something missing. I felt like, oh, I want to find a better way, and not social media, but I find a better way to connect. And then throughout the time from, really probably late 2019 through 2022, or no, maybe even 2021, I can't remember, but through that time thinking, I have a lot to share. And I called my blog or my Instagram account Just a Girl, because a lot of people listening to this are just like me. They're moms, they're wives, sisters, friends, mothers, and we all experience very similar things. We could be very different and have very different opinions and ideas about things, but lo and behold, we're still people and we experience a lot. What I found in talking to others, others who were close to me, others who were just acquaintances, there are a lot of times where we could be surrounded but feel very isolated, and thinking I'm the only one that's going through this, or my kid is the only one who doesn't have 12 friends, or, my kids are upset about XYZ or having trouble with this. I don't think no one else ever seems like they have to go through it, or whatever it may be. But you actually realize once you start listening and reading that you are thinking, feeling, and experiencing the same things that everybody else is. And how can I get out some of the things that actually worked for me to others? And so that's where kind of Just a Girl came from. Also during COVID, and the World Health Organization titled this, so I don't take any credit for it, but we also faced an infodemic, which I think we face all the time now with too much information.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, like you're on Instagram and you can follow this person who shows you these clothes, and then you can follow this person who tells you how to wash your hair, and then you can do this, and it's great. But then you're like, wait, they just counteracted each other. So what am I supposed to do? Am
Right.
I supposed to eat more protein, or am I supposed to do this, or am I supposed to count calories? But I don't know. And I'm, and so all of a sudden
And you're
you're
overwhelmed, like,
right,
what?
right. And so I started with the thing that I knew and I felt good about through my experience. And the other big part of it was recognizing that our mental health is so incredibly important in life. And how can you get a bird's eye view of your own life? And how can you start to value your mental health and the mental health of those around you? And then other things will fall into place.
Well, I think that's the most challenging thing. And going through all this, you talk about you're very often, we all tend to do this, especially those I feel like that are very much in that caretaking role, put ourselves last when, and I'm even to blame for that, even though I preach that all the time. It's like, you've got, self-care, you've got to take care of yourself. And I don't mean that to be in a selfish way, but self-care isn't selfish. If you want to, it's essential to be able to give yourself that time and love, just like we do everyone else, to be your strongest, to help all of those people in your life. And, I think the biggest thing is we can get run down with so much stress and everything. So recognizing and doing the things for your mental health. And, I've always talked about this, but journaling or going to therapy or exercise. I mean, for me, movement's one of the biggest things that I've always, relied on. Eating well, sleeping well. There's so many things that I don't like to say are easy because they're not necessarily time wise, but they're simple, right? They're simple things to do. So in you being able to find that, what were some of the biggest things that you felt, even with minimal time, that you really um, felt got you through? I know you mentioned exercise, but what else did you feel like you were able to kind of do to keep yourself sane and get through all this?
Yeah, journaling 100%. That's where I started. I started with journaling. And, on my Just a Girl profile, I put a couple journal prompts on there, but you can find journal prompts. You just Google journal prompts and you can do what make it what you want. It doesn't have to be perfect. I didn't start with prompts. I started with like writing a little bit about my day and what I was thinking in my head. And then I started writing down intentions. And then I started writing down gratitude.
Yeah.
And then, there were some times where I was like, I mentally can't set goals for right now, and what does a goal mean? And so I started with like really short-term stuff that was easy. Like, what are my goals for tomorrow? Put that basket of laundry away. That might be the only thing I want to get done for the next day. But it was like, okay, I wrote this down. I really want this to get done. Get out for a walk or whatever. So you combine the two things, right? Look into, a new pair of jeans. Honestly, it was just like super simple. But then I wrote down different motivational statements and prayers and things that I felt meant something to me. Sorry, I'm getting a pop-up.
Gotta love that as we multitask.
I know, right?
Working women. Hey.
Oh, yeah. And I have to say, I got into a better fitness journey in like 2017. I got into a much better routine, maybe even 2016. I'm trying to remember. But I started to value that, one, for myself and my own mental health and being more fit. Two, as an example for my kids, when I was in college was when I really jumped into more fitness and stuff like that. Like I was I played volleyball, like did like school sports, stuff like that. But I never really got into a lot of different things. I mean, now, knowing what I know now, going back to it, like, why didn't I start weightlifting earlier? But that's okay.
Yeah, of course, of
And
course.
even just, for young moms who are listening to this, who have little tiny kids, like, exercise, not even for the weight or anything, but for the mental health benefit of taking that break for yourself. And you're probably a little younger, and so your body's going to respond faster, right? But for sleep, for all of that stuff. So the winding down at the end of the night and journaling was my catalyst. And then I started with that. And then I really got more into diversifying my fitness. And I do
Mhm.
some cardio, but I love weights. And then also more of like from a Pilates or a yoga, and really saying, this is my time. And instead of like dreading an hour's worth of a class or exercise or something, saying, I can make this what I want to. I can push as hard or as soft as I want to, but this is
Sure.
my time. And I'm going to zone out. I'm going to either listen to the instructor or to music. Um, and so I would say journaling and exercise were my two things that really got me through. And then, like listening to people like you, Jen, and like different podcasts on how you could how to harness what's inside of you and how
Mhm.
to actually figure out what that is, because that's another step. And obviously eating well, just like, because like you said, movement is medicine, food is medicine. um
Absolutely.
and our son is on the spectrum. And so
Mhm.
he takes medication because he needs it, right? But it's
Mhm.
also, what is he eating? How much is he eating? And how much is he moving? And those
Right.
things are huge components for setting structure and all of that too. So, but I would say, yeah,
Absolutely.
journaling was definitely my catalyst.
And I love how you talked about too, you just start with something simple. I, as part of my like online app or my Patreon memberships, I always send out like a motivational piece each week. And I have different themes that I talk about. And right now, for my Gen Z tribe on Patreon, we're talking about fear. And a big part of that, I say, journaling is a big aspect because sometimes the fear in our minds, it's so much greater, not to take away from it, but it's so large in our head. Everything's swimming around and it seems like it just takes over everything. So when you can journal and write something down, it's a physical act, but you're also then able to kind of see and translate what's in your mind onto paper, and it looks a little bit more attainable or achievable. Or what is my greatest fear? This is the fear. What could I do if that happens? You know, A, B, and
Right.
C. So just having that plan and looking at it. But, a friend of mine posted recently too, he'll talk about gratitude as journaling, or, he opened up his journal and he was like going through a very challenging time in his life. And he's like, I couldn't write anything. He's like, I was just trying to think too much and put down way too much. And, I love is having my husband as my live-in editor, but Jay being a writer, and he used to teach, he's like, I would always tell people to stop being your own editor. Like, just put the words on paper. Like, don't self-edit. You don't have to make it look pretty. And in journaling, you're not trying to write like a novel. Just even if you're putting down a phrase or a keyword, something to just release and put it down. It does not have to be perfect.
Right.
So I love that how you were saying just little goals of like folding the laundry. I'm starting there. But you're instilling that habit and getting into that routine, and with consistency, and especially I love that before bedtime, you're kind of releasing all that and getting prepared for the next day. You're setting yourself up for a better night's sleep. And I think that's something that's really, really important. So I'm glad you brought that up and shared that, where I think that's a big struggle for people when and they're like, I'm not a writer. I don't know what to write.
Totally. And then you think it has to like look good. And it's like, no, you
Right.
know what? Like, I'm a doodler and I like to like draw stuff in color. And so sometimes if that was the mood I was in, I would spend the time being like, okay, what month are we in? Oh, June. Great. I'm going to make a cover page for June now. And I'm going to just draw on it. And that could be like my night. That could be what I
Sure.
did. to do that creative expression, right? And then the next
Mhm.
night it could be like, sometimes I would literally write down, terrible day, I feel like shit, and I don't feel like writing. And like I almost had to tell myself that was okay. It's not perfect. Sometimes I would get
Yeah.
really motivated and be like, I think I have to finish this in the morning or I'm not going to sleep. I'm excited,
Right.
like
Yeah.
it's not a perfect science. You're not getting graded, and
Giving ourselves some grace, I think, is important. It's like things don't
100%.
have to be perfect. Um, but I do think, and this is something that we can probably go into in even another episode, but I think what really, and I'd love for you, I know we talked about this potentially doing a blog post, but I think we're just at that time in our lives, when we're younger, we're growing up, we have our parents. We've been fortunate to have solid, wonderful, amazing examples of parents in our lives, and the love and support they give us. And, you know, those moms especially are like just, always there. And I think we've always appreciated that. And then something happens though, and it's like, what do? You don't even know. Um, but it's hard, to see, and especially now, like my parents, my mom just turned 65, my dad turned 65 in September, but as they're, and still like that's young, it's still young, but like
Yeah.
they're getting older. And especially I think with me being out here, we get home all the time. And this isn't the permanent state of things. Like one day, we'll be back. But um I find myself, I am a very big worrier. And so I pray a lot like at night, and I just, you know, I have my crystals sometimes when I'm really in that mode.
Yes.
Just whatever it is, my Nana's rosary, something to hold on to. But it's like, as you get older, I think you just realize how like fragile life is. And having that idea of like your parents aging and they may not be here forever, that I can't even like say it. I'll start
Oh yeah.
crying, and you going through that. But it's like, that's a whole thing. Like, how do we deal with that?
It's a
It's
whole thing. And I've listened
tough.
to, I'm lucky to have really great girlfriends.
Mhm.
And so a lot of us have experienced, or all of us have experienced really life-changing events with our families. And so being able to understand that we're all going through something at any given moment in time helps. You have to have humor. You
Yeah.
just you have to, because there are I mean, your parents kind of turn into like elementary school kids, where you can reason with them, but then all of a sudden they're like offense, and you're like, did you even hear what I just said? So,
Yeah.
it's like, and so it's learning each other again, because you're
Mhm.
learning who they are, you're accepting what was influential in their life growing up, that's been their either ideal or thought process for all of those years.
Sure.
What you've experienced, and that it's a really weird time in your life when you actually realize, I might be better at this than my parents are. I looked up to my parents my whole life. They knew everything. I remember being like, how do you know what that word means? How do you know this? Or how do you were so good at this and so giving and so blah blah blah. And then you get
Mhm.
to a point and it's really humbling, because you're like, I I've done more than they did, or I've done, this, and you're
Right.
kind of like, whoa, and you feel kind of sad, but like really happy at the same time. And so dealing with that is a whole, I mean, we could talk for like 3 days at least,
Yeah.
so we
I
could
think, yeah,
continue the discussion, but it's just a whole different part of life.
I think that's something we maybe take a deeper dive into. Because I feel like a lot of people experience that, and especially our age. How far apart are we? I'm 41. I'll be 42
Oh,
in
okay.
December.
And I'll be 45. So we're 3 years.
Okay, right.
Yeah. You're a little bit, I think you're just a little bit younger than Cardo, right?
I'm a year younger, I think, than Carlo.
Okay.
Because I graduated in 2000.
Okay. Okay.
I was born in 81.
Yeah, so was
Was
he.
he in 80?
No, he was 81.
Okay. But I think we were a grade
I think
apart.
you were different. Yeah.
Yeah, in school. So, it's such a big thing that I think, so many of us, you know, deal with or will deal with, right? Ultimately. And so that's something I think that would be a great topic, obviously, to, parenting, momming, all this stuff. There's so many things I feel like I'm excited that we can kind of share and talk about in the future. But I really wanted to bring you on today for you to share and just talk about, your Instagram account, your story. And I think that's important too with like the overload of content out there. I think COVID was such a time too where everyone was transitioning to go, of course, online. I mean, that's all we really had. I mean, the silver lining for me was that I was able to kind of transition my job and life out here because I could do that and not have to rely solely on beauty services and in-person services anymore. But it is, everybody experiences something. And I think everyone doesn't have the courage to necessarily be vulnerable and put it out there. And I think that's important because people will find that who they connect with. There is a lot of maybe nonsense there that we have to kind of filter through, or you don't know what's true, what's not. But I feel like you gravitate towards those people that you really, really connect with. And so that's important. And I think it's important that you put yourself out there, and I can appreciate that. And, I think that's a big thing for you to do. So thank you for doing that for all those people that you can impact and lives, that you can touch. I think that's a super important thing.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my goal,
Right.
and getting it out there. And obviously everybody has to do, we're at the point where we're getting closer to retirement age than we were to starting out age. And now you're healthy, knock on wood, and
Yep.
want to excel. And so what's your second half of your life planning? And so
Mhm.
sometimes you think, what do I want to do? And I'm like, well, I have a lot to share, and I would love to be able to share it and know that it's coming from a place of gratefulness, but also I really just want to share. I'm not looking to make money off of people, because I'm doing it for the people who are searching for the info, who feel alone, but also for the people who don't have the personality or the wherewithal to ask and be like, oh, wait, what? What's this? Like, I identify with that, or I can connect to that. And just trying to help people think of more than just their little circle, and how they can leave a better stamp on their life and the world and others. Just be more accepting.
I think that was a big thing too that was kind of lost, and people are wanting back and getting back, but is that sense of community and people they can relate with. During COVID, that was kind of lost when you couldn't really connect with people. And I think that took a while to kind of transition back out of. So I think people are still trying to find their tribe, find their community, and connect with those people, right? And I know for myself too, with like becoming a stepmom, I found an Instagram account, Radical Stepmom Podcast, which was amazing. And talk about humor. She uses humor all the time. But it's like, oh my God, you can relate. And it's just this sense of community and people there, and the things she would post, you're like, oh my God, like that, totally, like I get it. So it's just knowing that other people are out there experiencing a lot of the same things. And there might be unique emotions, but it's that sense of community I think people are really looking for and striving for. And, connecting with people that you may never have thought you'd connect with. And I think jiu-jitsu is a big part. Like I've always been able to kind of experience that because on the mat, you don't know who somebody may be, what their job is, what their career is. You know, you have like top lawyers with, you know, like restaurant worker with someone from, you know, God knows where, and that's from DC. You know, it's just like such a mix of people. But on the mat, you're all the same. You get very humbled, right? So there can't be a lot of ego, and it brings such an amazing group of people together. So I think keeping that in mind and just really, you know, helping people be empathetic and kind towards others, because you don't know what people are going through.
100%. I love that. I love just, and that's kind of where I, you know, like I said in the beginning, I don't care where you came from, what you look like, you know, what you believe in. We all do experience so many of the similar feelings and anxieties. And especially when you look at all our subgroups, women, men, parents, step parents, grandparents, you know, and where are we and what are we thinking about? And, you know, so I think social media is a blessing because we can reach a lot of people at the same time, but it's also a curse where you see the highlight reel and then you could have bad feelings from certain things, or people find it easier to make it their soapbox as opposed to just using it to connect. So,
yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I'm like, I feel like we could talk forever, but I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to, you know, kind of break some of these topics up. And, you know, I want people to go to your Instagram, and I think you have so much stuff to share that's so beneficial. So for just a reminder for everyone, it's the Instagram is just a girl 1978. So it's just _a_ girl 1978. But is there anything else you want to share, Leah? Like any last words of wisdom or anything before we part?
well, I have like quotes because I have quotes like everywhere, but
I love it. I'm such a
so I'm going to read off my whiteboard. You can't see it, but I'm going to read off it. So
okay, yes.
And I had to do it. To improve your mood, exercise. To think more clearly, meditate. To understand the world, read. To understand yourself, write. To help people, help yourself. Again, self-care is not selfish. And to learn faster, have fun.
I love that. You have to, I think you need to send that to me so that I can include it in the description as like your favorite quote that you ended with, because that's very powerful and very important. And I think people definitely, that would resonate with a lot of people. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on today. This was so fun. How was your first podcasting experience?
Oh, great. I didn't feel that nervous. It was wonderful.
Excellent. I love it. To all the listeners out there, any referrals or guests you'd like me to have on, please send me a message on my Instagram at All Things Gen Z, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.